Ask Pokey. Pokimane would never reply to me. A man. Milk Super. I would love to milk Super. My god. How does Tank feel after the patch? Well, random viewer that is named, I can't find you right now. Monked Luffy. I think Tank feels definitely better. You survive a lot longer on Tank. You do a lot of things on Tank that you couldn't before. Like, for example, walking next to the edge without getting booped, because there is no way you can get booped. And if you get booped as a Tank player, you should probably uninstall. It doesn't really solve the underlying issue with Tank and why Tank feels so boring. And it's purely because that even if they giga buff Tank right now, in a lot of situations, this just makes Tank really infuriating to play against. It doesn't feel like it's fair. It just feels like Tank is really easy to get away with for a lot of stuff. I don't think it's fair to Lucio players or people that play characters that can boop, that they can't boop the tanks. I think if you miss position as a tank, you should be punished for it. For example, when I play Winston, I like to boop tanks off the map, right? It makes sense that they don't get knocked back as much, but 50% is way too much. And you can't boop them anymore. So I think the underlying issue with a lot of things, especially for tank, Blizzard loves solving issues by just adding random stats, which don't really mean anything in the long run. Because if you buff every tank, then it doesn't change the fact that the other tank can just counter swap you all the time, or the enemy team can still counter swap you. Like, yeah, Winston can live a lot longer and it feels good, but if they go, you know, Zenbab, Roadhog, like Reaper, Bastion, you will take less damage as long as you have armor, but you still don't have a good time and you shouldn't be playing this hero. And the tank gameplay just revolves around everyone just swapping all the time. It's just kind of boring. Because, for example, when you play support, a lot of people, I've played quite a bit of support, right? And I'm sure people are gonna argue and say, oh, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. When I play support, I can play Larry the entire game. I'm not forced to switch if I'm playing well. But when you play tank, even if you play perfectly, a lot of the times that's not good enough. Because the enemy team can counter your perfect gameplay by just, you know, picking something that, you know, destroys you most of the time. So that kind of just makes it boring because you don't get rewarded for your skill much. It's a lot better now because you can survive a lot more and you don't get headshot as much, and armor changes are cool and stuff. But you have to realize, but with the armor changes, just because you don't take as much damage from Reapers, Bastions, or whatever, you still take a lot of damage from Junkrats. You take more damage from Junkrats, more damage from Widowmakers, more damage from Sojourns. So it's not like it's a net buff or anything. Quite the contrary. It just kind of forces people to play more burst characters. The usual suspects are less annoying, but then you can pick something else. With the headshot modifier, that's -25, they try to combat this thing. You don't have to hit headshots to blow up a tank, right? With the dog, I really like the passive health regen, by the way. I just want to point out. I think that one is really good. It saved me a few times here and there. I think it's really cool. Because I can just I don't have to beg for heals when, you know, I do some crazy play and I just run away. Either way, as I was saying, outside of passive heals and maybe armor changes, which I like, I don't think the other changes do that much. They're more like band-aids to solve an issue instead of thinking of a cool solution. And no, I'm not gonna discuss 6v6. I'm sure plenty of people are gonna be like, oh, this all would have been solved with 6v6. It wouldn't have been, and I don't care. It's not 6v6, right? And they're not going 6v6 right now. And no, I'm not being paid by Blizzard to say this, right? I just don't see a reason to discuss this thing when it's not happening in the first place. Once they announce, if ever, that they want to go back to 6v6, then I'll start discussing 6v6 balance. Until then, it's just a waste of my time. I can just see the comments, right? Again, it just doesn't solve the underlying issue with tanks. Tanks, you can do a lot of skill expression, but sometimes even if you play perfectly, you're still not rewarded for it. But for example, if you play Widowmaker perfectly and you get a headshot every single time in a lobby, there is very little people can do depending on the map, really, right? I'm not saying it's an issue only for tanks. This issue happens for others as well, but it's way less. It's way bigger when playing tank because, you know, here I'm gonna argue for 6v6, even though I don't really support it. But one of the reasons, truthfully, is because there's one tank. You can go 6 people, you can go 5 people, counter one tank, and if the tank is countered, it's a 4-man game, right? That is true, like, because you can't really do much. Like, at least back in the day, you could go a second tank and do stuff like pocket the tank, or you could, you know, split delegate resources in different areas in a team game. But now it's one tank. You can just counter the tank, and if you counter the tank, you win the game. But counter swapping exists back in the day as well. My point is, the entire idea of Overwatch, with a lot of abilities and a lot of things, is it surrounds, it has this idea that just making an ability that feels good is good enough, but it's not. Like, I don't like the design philosophy if you compare it with, for example, back in the, like, with Reinhardt, when they made Reinhardt has a lot of counterplay. You can counterpin his charge, that feels good. You can run away from his E, that feels good. You can break his shield if he shields. Like, there's a lot of layers when playing against Reinhardt that if you understand them, you can play really well. And when he shatters, you can just block it or jump or do a lot of things. It adds layers to the game. With a lot of new tank characters, there's no layers. Shift gives you shout, you go through everything and you axe them, and right click can be blocked by shields and stuff, sure. And then her ult can be countered by, you know, usual suspect, just CC or cleanse. And speaking of cleanse, it's just I don't like this ability. I think the main issue with this ability is there's no counterplay. This is the ability. You could eat it with Matrix, but it is impossible to eat it because you just throw it at your feet. There is no counterplay to Kiriku's playstyle. It's a fun character to play. You get instant value for everything. Her Suzu does a lot. Her shift TPs through walls. She can wall climb as well, and she can heal and she can damage, and her ult is just instant value as well, right? It's fine to have some instant value abilities, but if you compare it to Mercy, for example, when she reses, she's AFK, right? That's an easy way to punish her. There is risk reward, right? When you compare it to Ana has really long cooldowns. That is her risk reward. 14 seconds for the sleep, 12 for the nade. And you can block with the nade with the shield, the bubble, Matrix, the abilities. She has no mobility as well. This character, it feels good when you play against this character. It never feels bad unless you play Roadhog and you suck at the game. But it feels good because when I get slept on Monkey, I know that the other character, the other person played really well. That makes me feel good because I know I could have done something about it. But when I play against a Kirikou, I know I can't do anything about this or about this. It's just kind of boring. It's like you dive, she gets away. And this entire design philosophy applies to tanks as well. Queen gets instant value, but she's a fun tank. She's the least of the problems. Mauga is just one of the main reasons why Mauga is so annoying to play against is that he just gets like when you play against a Mauga, there is skill involved with it, but you can't counter his charge. It's unstoppable. You can't counter his E. You can nade him, but they can just Suzu it. He just shoots you, and that's about it. And his cage, when he gets it, he just walks up to you, and he ults you, and you guys are probably dead. It's just boring. There's no layers to it. There's nothing to it except, you know, the basic sleep dart, the basic random CC. When you play Winston, why Winston is so beloved is that you jump in with shift, but you need to think when you jump in. One bad jump, you die, you lose the fight, you lose the game. You place a bubble, but when you place a bubble, you might want to block a CC or you want to do something else. There's a lot of layers to it because the bubble isn't a shield. And when you primal, you don't just get kills by primaling like a lot of other routes. You need to know how to use the ability. Versus other tanks like Queen Ult that just, you know, it's super easy to get value on Queen Ult in most situations. Malga Ult is super easy. Ramatra can allow for a little bit more skill expression, but a lot of the time it just kind of relies on like, oh, you know, and then you just kind of punch them, right? And then you block punch, block punch, block punch, block punch, block punch. Like once you're in Nemesis form, you can't really do much except block punch, and then when you get your ult, you just press it and you win. There isn't much skill expression. And even if you play, and so if you play some older tanks like Winston and Reinhardt, like in ranked, like I'm not saying Winston is bad, Winston is really good, but there's a few reasons for that. For example, his Primo is just one of the best ults in the game in the hands of people that can actually play the game. And his playstyle plays really well with the team. But if you play in ranked, you can be really good at Winston, you can play perfectly. But if they just go Malga or Roadhog, it's just enough to shut you down, like no matter what, right? There is no layers to it. You can't really do much about it. All they have to do is just chase you around the map, just shoot you a lot, and if you have ult, just save their ult, and that's it. You're denied, and you have to go swap. And when you swap, for example, fucking Orisa. when you swap to Orisa, then they swap to something else, and then they swap to this, and then you swap to that. It's kind of boring gameplay, right? I think the core of the issue with tank is that people just want to play their tanks because every tank is so different. But it just feels really bad to play your tank, because the moment you play your tank, unless it's the absolute meta, you're gonna get counter swapped until you are playing the absolute meta. And especially if you're a lower elo, it's super easy to get counter because you're not that good, right? You're not like a god gamer, so it is especially an issue in lower elos where people aren't that mechanically good or know the character. They don't have a chance to learn the character because they just keep counter swapping you, and that's annoying. Yeah, either way, I don't think tank is miserable or anything. I think the patch helped, but I think it just helped in the wrong way, and it just made a lot of players still feel the same misery as before, but a little bit less, and also extended that misery to the rest of the team, because it does feel kind of boring to play Lucio and never get a boop on the tank or do anything really. Because the issue with tank is, like, sometimes tank is really annoying to play against and you can't ever kill him. But sometimes you can't play the game and you have 20 deaths. I'm glad that you enjoyed the Zest videos. I don't think tank players will ever be happy in any game. Because at the end of the day, tank is about being miserable. And if the tank isn't miserable, then the rest of the team is. And if the rest of the team is miserable, then more people are miserable. It's about delegating misery. Who's going to be more miserable? Your teammates or you? And I think a lot of the times the answer is the tank. The one person should be more miserable. I've had fun as tank in League. Yeah, but League has items. Overwatch doesn't. How do you control your jump? Shift, press S. Shift, press W. Shift, press A. Look up, jump high. Look down, jump low. I haven't done a unranked gym because I just don't want to do unranked gyms. No, but I won't be suffering if I do a Winston ranked gym because Winston isn't bad. It will be just a stomp. That's next level marketing from a developer right there. It's a weep stream. Type 2 if you are currently evading taxes. Mods, send the IRS.